if this is all successful, I'll see you in for season 6, and if it isn't, I won't. Take care, everyone.
Jeremy Clarkson cheated death twice, and most fans had no idea. Within months, he suffered 2 serious medical emergencies, watched his farm spiral through setback after setback, and even admitted from a hospital bed that he wasn't sure what came next. So, what exactly has been happening behind the scenes? And after everything he's been through, will the man who always seemed indestructible be able to bounce back again? Join us as we break down why things aren't looking good for Jeremy Clarkson lately. The man who has cheated death twice. Some public figures have their difficulties play out in the usual ways. A controversy here, a canceled show there. The kind of professional turbulence that generates headlines for a few days before the news cycle moves on. And then there are people whose difficulties come all at once, piling up on top of each other in a way that makes everyone paying attention stop and ask whether the person at the center of it all is actually going to be okay. Jeremy Clarkson has been firmly in the second category for the last 2 years. The man who spent 3 decades as the loudest, most combustible, most opinionated voice in British motoring television has found himself navigating a period not defined by horsepower or controversy, but by hospital beds, stents, cancer diagnoses, a farm under siege from tuberculosis, and a television farewell that ended with him speaking to the camera from a ward, telling his audience that if everything went well, he would see them for the next series, and if it did not, he would not. That moment, broadcast to millions of viewers in June 2026 as the season 5 finale of Clarkson's Farm, was not a scripted dramatic beat. It was a man who had really been through enough in the previous 18 months to make the uncertainty feel completely real. And for a crowd that had watched him be seemingly indestructible for 35 years, it hit in a way no one quite prepared for. That moment, aired to millions of viewers in June 2026 as the season 5 finale of Clarkson's Farm, was not a scripted, dramatic beat. He was a man who had really been through enough in the last 18 months to make the uncertainty feel entirely real. And for an audience that had spent 35 years watching him be seemingly indestructible, it hit in a way no one had quite prepared for. So, what has Jeremy actually been through? And how did a man seemingly born for television controversy end up delivering the most heartfelt moment of his career from a hospital bed? The health scare that started everything. What has defined Jeremy's recent years did not begin on a farm or in a television studio. It started in October 2024, when tests revealed he had blocked coronary arteries that put him at serious risk of a fatal heart attack. Doctors acted fast, inserting 2 stents, which are mechanical devices placed in the arteries to keep them open and restore normal blood flow to the heart. The procedure was neither elective nor minor. The kind of medical intervention that comes with a system under serious pressure, and the fact that it was required at all, raised questions about the state of Jeremy's health that the public was only beginning to understand at that point. He had been candid over the years about his lifestyle, the drinking, the eating, the smoking, and the general philosophy of treating the body as something that would cope with whatever you threw at it, rather than something that needed deliberate maintenance. The stents were the body's way of making it clear that the philosophy had limits. He recovered from the operation and went back to work, which in his case meant carrying on filming the 5th season of Clarkson's Farm at Diddley Squat, the 1,000-acre property in the Cotswolds he bought in 2008, and turned into the unlikely subject of one of Prime Video's most successful original series. What nobody knew at the time was that the heart operation was only the start of what 2025 was going to ask of him, and that the tougher news was still to come. The cancer diagnosis he hid for months. In May 2025, Jeremy had a routine medical checkup. Blood tests showed an elevated PSA, the type of result that requires further testing, and a series of tests followed, an MRI, and eventually a biopsy that confirmed what he would later refer to as some of the worst news he had received as an adult. He had prostate cancer, an aggressive cancer. Instead of stopping production or making a public statement, he kept working and kept filming, going through the harvest as if the diagnosis were something he could just schedule around, which, in a way, was his approach. In a conversation with Caleb Cooper and his land agent, Charlie Ireland, at the farm, captured on camera, he told them the information with the matter-of-fact composure of someone who had already processed it privately and arrived at some version of acceptance before letting anyone else in. He told them he had cancer, that it was aggressive but had been caught early, and that he had been hoping the harvest could be finished before treatment interrupted everything, although it was now obvious the timing was going to fall right in the middle of it all. Caleb's answer was immediate and almost comically disbelieving, the reaction of someone who just could not fit the information into his understanding of how things were supposed to go, as if the universe had made a clerical error. In August 2025, Jeremy had a high-intensity focused ultrasound procedure to treat the malignant tumor, where around 10% of his prostate was removed. The procedure was followed by complications he described in subsequent interviews with the kind of honest disclosure that has always been the most disarming thing about him. He was on blood-thinning medication for his heart condition, but had to stop it for the cancer treatment. And a few weeks after the cancer procedure, he made the mistake of starting the blood thinners too quickly. That situation, as he described it, was the most painful experience of his life, all self-inflicted, and delivered in the manner of one who had learned something about himself through a good deal of unnecessary suffering. In the final scene of the Season 5 finale, which aired in June 2026, he appeared in a hospital bed and spoke directly to the audience with an acknowledgement that the season had begun with him in a hospital bed and was ending the same way, with some of the treatment having gone awry in the meantime. He told his viewers that if all went well, they would see him for Season 6, and if it did not go well, they would not, and he wished them well before the screen went dark. It was the quietest and most human moment in the whole run of a show that had already delivered more genuine emotion than anyone involved had expected or was fully prepared for. But while Jeremy was fighting the most serious health battle of his life, the farm itself was simultaneously dealing with a string of disasters that would have broken most people who hadn't already survived a heart scare and cancer diagnosis in the same calendar year. The farm that keeps fighting back. Diddley Squat had never been a story of smooth agricultural success, which was exactly why it worked as television. But the years leading into the Season 5 filming period produced a concentration of setbacks that, even by the show's established standards of calamity, was remarkable. An outbreak of bovine tuberculosis was first detected at Diddley Squat in July 2025, and Jeremy announced it to the press with the kind of blunt devastation that suggested it had hit him harder than most of the things the farm had thrown at him before. One of the most painful moments recorded by the cameras was the decision to slaughter the first cow ever bought for the farm. A cow pregnant with twin calves, after she showed 2 inconclusive tuberculosis tests. A subsequent post-mortem showed she had not, in fact, had tuberculosis at all, meaning the farm had lost a pregnant animal for no good reason, but disease management rules governing bovine TB in the United Kingdom allow no retrospective mercy. The farm was put on lockdown, which, under agricultural law, meant it could not operate as a business, could not move animals on or off the property, and could not function in any of the ways a working farm needs to remain financially viable. Bovine TB has been one of the most contentious and politically charged issues in British farming for decades, partly because of the economic devastation it causes, and partly because of the debate over badger culling as a means of controlling its spread, a debate Jeremy had entered with his usual lack of restraint in previous seasons. After 7 months of lockdown at Diddley Squat, the farm was declared TB-free officially, and he was finally able to report in a newspaper column in March 2026. The relief of that news lasted about as long as it took for the next problem to arrive, when one of the donkeys was diagnosed with laminitis and had to be put down. Jeremy was not surprised at this, given the particular exhaustion of one who has come to understand that farming works on the principle that one piece of good news arrives only when accompanied by fresh disaster. On top of the outbreak of tuberculosis, 2025 had brought heat waves, drought, and a harvest so bad that Jeremy publicly described it as one of the worst he had ever had at Diddley Squat, with yields nowhere near what the farm needed to be financially viable, and there was no sign that the following year would be any kinder. All of that has caused Season 6 its own separate production issues. In 2026, the show's social team confirmed that filming had already been faced with a break from production, more positive tuberculosis testing among the animals, and relentless rain that had made outdoor filming absolutely impossible for stretches of the schedule. In his Sunday Times column in February 2026, Jeremy painted a picture of a farm effectively frozen, with no planting possible and the cattle still locked down by disease, the television show, and the agricultural work it documented both suspended at the same time. For Season 6, a summer 2027 release window has been indicated, meaning the gap between the two series will be the longest in the show's history. But to understand why that gap matters, you have to step back from the farm altogether and look at the broader story of a television career that has now outlived almost everything the industry threw at it, including the firing that most people assumed would finish him off for good. The television career that keeps transforming. The rebooted Top Gear that Jeremy conceived with producer Andy Willman and launched on the BBC in October 2002 was, by any measurable standard, one of the most successful factual television programs ever made. At its peak, the series aired in 214 territories worldwide, with an estimated global audience of 350 million viewers, a figure that earned it a place in the Guinness World Records as the most widely watched factual television program on Earth. It generated approximately £150 million a year for BBC worldwide, and was so deeply rooted in the heart of British cultural life that when the BBC chose not to renew Jeremy's contract in March 2015, after he physically assaulted producer Oisin Timon in a dispute over food at a Yorkshire hotel while filming, over 1 million people signed a petition demanding his reinstatement. The BBC's 15-day investigation found the attack was unprovoked, and Jeremy had self-reported the incident to the BBC before Timon had filed any complaint. His contract was not renewed when it expired, and Richard Hammond and James May resigned in solidarity shortly afterwards, with Andy Willman leaving with them. The attempt to keep Top Gear going without any of them, initially under radio presenter Chris Evans, who quit after one series, never gave the viewers a show that came close to what the original trio had built, and the program has been on indefinite hiatus since 2022. Jeremy's next move was to the Grand Tour with Hammond and May on Amazon, which retained a big audience but never quite found the identity that Top Gear had had at its peak, partly because the specific chemistry of the original show was inseparable from the institutional context of the BBC, and recreating it elsewhere produced something frequently very good, but never quite the same thing. The Grand Tour continued until 2024, when the trio shot one final special that was a proper farewell to a format that had defined British automotive television for more than 2 decades. By contrast, Clarkson's farm had found something that none of Jeremy's previous television work had ever quite found: real vulnerability. The incompetence was real, the financial losses were documented, the frustrations with planning bureaucracy and agricultural bureaucracy, and the basic unreasonableness of the weather were lived rather than performed, and the audience that responded to it was considerably wider than the audience that had ever watched him drive cars too fast while shouting about horsepower. The show became Prime Video's most popular original series in the United Kingdom, with the Season 5 premiere estimated to have drawn 4 to 4.5 million viewers, and Season 4 reportedly finishing as the second most watched TV series across all UK streaming and linear channels through 2025. Throughout the run of Clarkson's farm, Jeremy's creative partner since Top Gear, Andy Willman, described himself as the glass-half-empty voice who always thought they'd finally pushed their luck too far. But time and again, he was confounded by an audience that just refused to stop growing. But what nobody on that production had expected was that the story Season 5 would go on to tell would have nothing to do with farming at all, and that the man who had just signed off from a hospital bed, telling millions of people he might not see them again, was about to deliver the most important public health message British television had seen in years. The remission that changed the ending. After the cameras stopped rolling for Season 5, the cancer treatment worked. The high-intensity focused ultrasound treatment took care of the malignant tumor, and a prostate-specific antigen test done about 2 months prior to his interview with the Sunday Times in June 2026 showed no evidence of cancer, the kind of result that takes a diagnosis from active treatment to remission. He told the Sunday Times he considered himself without question the luckiest man in the world, explaining that the cancer had been aggressive enough to have spread into the pancreas or elsewhere, and if it had done so, the story would have ended very differently. Prostate cancer detected at an early stage has an overall 5-year survival rate of around 98%, a figure that Jeremy's case brings into sharp focus, since the difference between his outcome and a much worse one seems to have been the decision to get a routine blood test when he did. The same weekend, he posted a video on Instagram in which he delivered what was considered to be the most direct public health message of his career. He said he was fine because the cancer was caught early, and it was caught early because he went and got tested. He had a fair amount of accuracy in predicting the typical British male reaction to this news: reluctance. He addressed that reluctance head-on by explaining that testing today involves nothing more invasive than a blood test. For anyone whose general practitioners might refuse to test them in the absence of symptoms, he suggested a creative approach to the appointment, saying that describing non-existent nighttime trips to the bathroom and some general difficulty in that department would likely secure the required referral. He was also clear about the stakes, noting that somewhere between 10,000 and 12,000 men die every year in the UK from prostate cancer, and that there was no good reason for anyone watching to be among them. In his Sunday Times interview, he described the whole experience with the directness of someone who had genuinely processed how close it had come, saying that getting tested was the reason he was sitting there talking nearly a year after diagnosis, and that the process was neither uncomfortable nor undignified, and was, in straightforward terms, a decision with no rational downside. On any reasonable measure, it was the most useful thing Jeremy Clarkson has done with a public platform in the 35 years he has had one. Not the most hilarious, not the most engaging, not the most controversial, but the most useful, which is maybe the most shocking sentence ever written about a man who built his career on the idea that usefulness was way less important than being entertaining. He has since confirmed he's already filming Season 6, which means the man who signed off from a hospital bed saying he might never see his audience again will be back on screen at diddly squat, doing what he's always done, which is making something deeply watchable out of everything going wrong at once. Do you think Jeremy Clarkson's cancer battle will change the direction of Clarkson's farm going forward? Or do you think he will go straight back to being exactly who he has always been? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.